Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was born with a powerful quirk. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. Heat. That was the first thing Izuku Midoriya remembered about the day his life changed. Not the warmth of the sun, or the humid cling of the Japanese summer, but a heat that bloomed from the inside out, sitting heavy and coiled in his stomach like a sleeping dragon. It was the day after Katsuki Bakugo had manifested his quirk. Katsuki had created small pops and sparks from his palms, earning the awe of the preschool teachers and the envy of every child in the neighborhood. Katsuki was the leader. He was the golden boy. He was going to be the greatest hero. Izuku remembered sitting in the sandbox, feeling a strange sense of pressure building in his chest. He was watching Katsuki bully a boy who had a minor finger-extending quirk. The heat in Izuku's stomach churned. It wasn't fear. It was indignation. "Stop it, Kaken!" Izuku had shouted, standing up. His small fists were clenched at his sides. Katsuki had turned, a sneer plastered on his face, small explosions popping like firecrackers in his hands. "Ha! What are you gonna do, Deku? You're quirkless. You can't do anything." I said stop it. The pressure inside Izuku snapped. It didn't come with a bang. It came with a roar, a sound like a rushing wind tunnel. The air in the playground suddenly warped. From Izuku's skin, a torrent of emerald green flames erupted. They didn't burn his clothes, and they didn't burn him. They swirled around him like a protective vortex, rising 6 feet into the air, casting a haunting, vibrant green glow over the terrified faces of the other children. The heat was intense, instantly drying the sand in the box and scorching the grass at the edges. Katsuki stumbled back, shielding his eyes from the blinding luminosity. Izuku gasped, looking at his hands. They were coated in fire, but they felt cool. He pushed his hand forward instinctively, and a stream of green fire shot out like a lance, dissipating just inches from Katsuki's face, leaving the air shimmering with heat haze. Silence descended on the playground. Even the teachers were frozen, staring at the small boy wreathed in an inferno. Katsuki lowered his arms. The sneer was gone. In its place was something Izuku would come to recognize intimately over the next 10 years, a mixture of shock, calculation, and a burning, ferocious jealousy. That was the day the hierarchy broke. Izuku Midoriya wasn't the pebbles on the side of the road. He was the wildfire waiting to happen. 10 years later, the graphite tip of the pencil snapped against the paper. Izuku sighed, brushing the broken lead off his notebook page. He was currently sketching a rough diagram of Mount Lady's potential collateral damage ratio based on her size increase in urban environments. So, as third-year students, it's time to think seriously about your futures and what you want to do with your lives, the homeroom teacher announced, holding a stack of papers. The classroom was humid, filled with the restless energy of teenagers ready for the bell. I could pass out these career aptitude tests, but... The teacher paused, grinning. He threw the papers into the air. "Why bother? I know you all want to go to the hero track." The class erupted. Cheers and shouts filled the room as students activated their quirks in a display of youthful exuberance. Fingers elongated, eyes glowed, rocks levitated. Yes, you all have wonderful quirks," the teacher said, waving his hand for order. "But remember, using quirks in school is against the rules. Teach, don't lump me in with these extras." The voice was rough, arrogant, and cut through the noise like a knife. Katsuki Bakugo sat with his feet up on his desk, leaning back with an air of absolute superiority. They'd be lucky to end up as sidekicks to some busted D-lister. "I'm aiming for the top." The class turned on him, jeers and insults flying, but Bakugo merely smirked, small explosions crackling in his palm. "Oh, shut up. I aced the mock exams. I'm the only one here with the stuff to go to UA. Hi, UA? The national school?" One student gasped. "That has a 0.2% acceptance rate, and I'll crush it," Bakugo declared, his red eyes gleaming. "I'll surpass All Might and become the richest, most famous hero of all time. I'll be the only one from this garbage junior high to make it." "Actually," the teacher interrupted, glancing at his clipboard. "Midoriya has also applied to UA." The room went dead silent. It wasn't the silence of mockery, like in some other universe where Izuku was powerless. It was a heavy, anticipatory silence. Slowly, Bakugo took his feet off the desk. He didn't turn around. His shoulders stiffened, the muscles in his neck tensing. Izuku didn't flinch. He continued to sharpen his pencil with a small pocket blade, his eyes focused on his notebook. He could feel the eyes of the class on him. They weren't looking at him with pity, they were looking at him with the same wariness one might eye a loaded gun left on a table. Ha! Bakugo breathed out, a short, sharp sound. He turned in his seat, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He slammed a hand onto Izuku's desk. Smoke curled from his palm, stinging the edge of Izuku's notebook. So, you're actually going to try, huh? You think you can stand in my ring? Izuku stopped writing. He looked up, his green eyes meeting Bakugo's furious red ones. There was no fear in Izuku's gaze, only a calm, analytical assessment. It's not your ring, Kaken, Izuku said evenly. Yue accepts the best. My mock scores match yours. My practical application is higher. Why wouldn't I apply? The air in the classroom temperature spiked. It wasn't a metaphor. The ambient heat rose rapidly, sweat breaking out on the foreheads of the students nearby. A faint, green shimmer began to emanate from Izuku's skin, his body's natural reaction to stress and adrenaline. Score numbers on a paper don't mean anything when real combat starts, Bakugo growled, leaning closer. You think that flashy light show of yours makes you a hero? You're a liability, Deku. You burn everything you touch, and you just blow it up, Izuku retorted, his voice steady, though his hand gripped his pencil tight enough to crack it again. At least I can control the direction of my damage. You're a shotgun. I'm a sniper rifle. You! Bakugo's hand sparked, a threat of a real explosion. Bakugo! Midoriya! Settle down! The teacher barked, though he looked nervous. Save the fighting for the entrance exams. Bakugo held Izuku's gaze for a second longer, the air between them shimmering with heat distortion. Then, he scoffed and pulled away, the temperature in the room dropping instantly. Whatever, Bakugo muttered, slouching back into his seat. Just don't cry when the real pros extinguish you. Izuku looked back down at his notebook, brushing the singed edge of the paper. He didn't say anything, but his mind was racing. Liability. The word stung because it touched on his greatest insecurity. His quirk, officially registered as pyrokinesis, was a powerhouse. He could generate flames that exceeded 2,000 degrees Celsius. He could manipulate them telekinetically, shape them, and even use the propulsion for flight. But Bakugo was right about one thing: fire was hungry. Fire spread. Unlike a punch or an explosion that ended in a second, fire lingered. To be a hero, Izuku had to be better than powerful. He had to be precise. The final bell rang, releasing the students into the afternoon sun. Izuku packed his bag quickly, sliding his quirk analysis for the future Volume 13 into his yellow backpack. Hey, Midoriya! Izuku turned to see two classmates approaching him. They looked hesitant. You and Bakugo, you guys are intense today, one said. You really think you can get into UA? Izuku slung his bag over his shoulder. I have to. It's the only place that can teach me how to use this properly. He held up his hand, letting a small, harmless flame dance over his fingertips. It was a beautiful, emerald green, mesmerizing and dangerous. Being a hero isn't just about winning. It's about saving people without destroying the city in the process. Right, well, good luck, man. Better you than us. Bakugo looks like he wants to murder someone. Izuku offered a polite smile and walked out. He knew the dynamic well. He wasn't bullied, but he wasn't exactly friends with anyone either. His power intimidated people. It created a wall. The only person who dared to climb over that wall was Bakugo, and he did it with a sledgehammer. He took his usual route home, avoiding the main shopping district. He needed to think. He needed to clear his head. He muttered to himself as he walked, a habit he never outgrew. Kaken's blast radius has increased by 15% since last semester. If he closes the distance, I'm at a disadvantage because I can't use full heat at close range without burning myself. I need to work on my compression attacks. Maybe condense the flame into a beam. He walked under a highway underpass, the shadows providing relief from the sun. The tunnel was cool and damp. Izuku's steps echoed. He stopped. The grate of a manhole cover rattled behind him. Izuku spun around just as a massive, fluid shape erupted from the sewers. It was a sludge-like substance, smelling of rot and sewage, forming into a grotesque, liquid humanoid with bulging eyes and a jagged maw, a medium-sized invisibility cloak. The villain hissed, his voice gurgling. "You'll do nicely, kid." Izuku didn't scream. His eyes widened, his brain instantly shifting into combat mode. Fluid body. No solid points to strike. He wants to take over my body? Suffocation risk. The villain lunged, a tendril of sludge shooting forward like a whip. Too slow! Izuku yelled. He didn't run. He planted his feet. The air around him screamed as he ignited. Flash fire! A sphere of green fire exploded outward from Izuku's body. It wasn't an attack, it was a shield. The heat was instantaneous and searing. The sludge tendril hissed and evaporated into steam before it could touch him. The villain recoiled, screeching. "Hot! You little brat! Stay back!" Izuku warned. He raised his right hand, the air rippling above his palm. He focused. He didn't want to fill the tunnel with fire. The oxygen would deplete too fast, and the structural integrity of the bridge above might fail. Precision. He thrust his palm forward. A concentrated jet of green flame, no wider than a baseball bat, shot out with the force of a fire hose. The flame pierced the villain's liquid shoulder. The sludge boiled instantly, bubbling and popping. The villain howled in pain. A fire quirk? In a closed space? The villain laughed maniacally, though he was reforming his shoulder. "You're an idiot. You can't kill me without cooking yourself, kid." The villain was right. The tunnel was already getting unbearably hot. The steam from the evaporated sludge was making the air thick and hard to breathe. "He's regenerating faster than I can burn him," Izuku realized, sweat stinging his eyes. "If I use a large-scale blast, I'll run out of oxygen. If I let him get close, he'll suffocate me." "Got you!" The villain capitalized on Izuku's moment of analysis. He expanded his body, flooding the tunnel floor and rushing forward like a tidal wave. Izuku reacted on instinct. He pointed his hands downward. 2 jets of fire blasted from his palms, lifting him off the ground. He hovered near the ceiling of the tunnel, the flames acting like thrusters. "You can fly?" The villain grew frustrated, sending tendrils shooting up at him. Izuku weaved in the air, blasting the tendrils apart with precision shots. Pop hiss! Pop hiss! It was a stalemate. Izuku couldn't escape. The villain was blocking the exit, and he couldn't win without unleashing a level of power that would bring the highway down on top of them. "Give up!" the villain roared. "You're just tiring yourself out. I don't need to win," Izuku gritted out, his throat dry from the heat. "I just need to hold you here until a pro arrives." "No pro is coming. I lost that oath All Might 3 blocks back." Suddenly the manhole cover where the villain had emerged rattled again. A boom echoed through the sewer system. "It's fearless!" A booming voice shouted from the depths. "Why?" The villain froze. Izuku, hovering near the ceiling, felt a chill run through him despite the flames. The manhole cover flew into the air, smashed from below by a fist of pure justice. A massive figure leaped from the sewer, landing in the sludge with a heavy thud. He was tall, incredibly muscular, with blonde hair that stood up in 2 distinct tufts. "Because I am here, All Might, the #1 hero." Izuku's concentration wavered. "All Might? In person?" The villain panicked. "All Might! You persistent bastard!" He lashed out with a dozen sludge whips at the hero. All Might didn't even flinch. He drew his fist back. "Texas, wait!" Izuku shouted from the ceiling. The heat, All Might threw the punch. Smash! It wasn't a punch of physical impact, it was a punch of wind pressure. The force was cataclysmic. A tornado generated from the hero's fist, blasting down the tunnel. The wind pressure did 2 things. First, it completely obliterated the sludge villain, scattering his liquid body into harmless droplets that splattered against the walls. Second, the massive displacement of air created a vacuum. Izuku's flames were snuffed out instantly. Without his propulsion, Izuku dropped like a stone. He hit the concrete hard, rolling to absorb the impact. He coughed, his lungs gasping for fresh air as the wind pressure finally cleared the steam and smoke from the tunnel. "My apologies, young man." All Might's voice was loud and boisterous. He was already moving, scooping up the scattered remains of the villain into 2 empty soda bottles with blinding speed. "I didn't mean to get you caught in the crossfire. But the city sewers are a maze." Izuku sat up, rubbing his bruised elbow. He stared. The man was huge. He radiated a presence that felt heavier than gravity. All Might," Izuku stammered. He scrambled to his feet. You defeated him in 1 hit." "Ha! It was a close call," All Might said, capping the bottles. "He was a slippery one." "But you—" All Might turned his bright blue eyes onto Izuku. "You held him off admirably. That creates quite the heat wave you have there." "Dangerous, but impressive." Izuku felt a flush of pride mixed with shame. I couldn't stop him. I was just stalling. My fire, it doesn't work well on fluids. And I was afraid of damaging the tunnel." All Might paused. He looked at the scorched concrete walls, the blackened ceiling, and then back at the boy. Most kids with a quirk that powerful would have panicked and unleashed everything. This boy had held back to protect the infrastructure, even at risk to himself. "Restraint is the hardest part of the job," All Might said, giving a thumbs up. "Well, I must be off. I have to get this guy to the police." "Wait." Izuku stepped forward. "Please, I have a question." All Might was already crouching, preparing to jump. "I'm in a bit of a rush, young citizen. Can I be the best?" All Might froze. He slowly straightened up, looking back at the boy with the messy green hair and the intense eyes. Izuku clenched his fists at his sides. "My quirk, people say it's villainous. They say it destroys everything it touches. It scares people. Even when I try to save them, they look at me like I'm a bomb waiting to go off." Izuku looked down at his hands. "Can someone with a power made for destruction really be the #1 hero? Can I save people with this?" All Might looked at the boy. He saw the tension in his shoulders. He saw the scorch marks on the boy's own school uniform, evidence of the volatility of his power. The symbol of peace knew about burden. He knew about power that could destroy cities if mishandled. "Young man," All Might said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming more serious. "Power is just a tool. Fire burns, yes. But fire also forges steel. Fire cooks food. Fire keeps away the cold." Izuku looked up, his eyes shimmering. "It is not the nature of the quirk that determines the hero," All Might declared, pointing a finger at Izuku. "It is the heart of the one who wields it. You held back to save the tunnel. You thought of others before your own victory. That is the essence of a hero." All Might grinned, his signature smile blinding. "You can be a hero. In fact, if you learn to control that inferno, you could be a magnificent one." Tears pricked the corners of Izuku's eyes. He wiped them away furiously. He didn't cry often, not anymore, but this was different. "Thank you," he whispered. "Now I really must fly. Stay out of trouble." With a mighty leap, All Might rocketed into the sky, the wind pressure buffeting Izuku one last time. Izuku stood there for a long time, staring at the spot in the sky where the hero had vanished. He felt lighter. He felt validated. He didn't notice the steam rising from the soda bottles in All Might's pocket as he leaped away. He didn't know that the conversation had cost All Might precious seconds. Seconds that allowed the bottle cap to loosen just slightly. Izuku walked home in a daze. He needed to write this down. He needed to analyze All Might's wind pressure. He needed to figure out how to counter wind-based quirks that could snuff his flames. He was so lost in thought that he didn't realize he had walked straight into the Tatooine shopping district until he heard the explosion. Boom! The ground shook. People were screaming and running in the opposite direction. "It's a villain! The fires are spreading! Where are the heroes?" Izuku's head snapped up. Black smoke was billowing into the sky from an alleyway between 2 buildings. Fire? His feet moved before his brain did. He ran toward the chaos. When he broke through the crowd, he froze. It was the sludge villain. "How?" Izuku breathed. All Might caught him. The villain was massive now, having absorbed trash and debris from the alley. Fires were burning around him, not green fires, but normal, orange, destructive fires caused by explosions, and in the center of the sludge, struggling like a trapped animal, was Katsuki Bakugo. Bakugo was thrashing, his mouth covered by the sludge. He was setting off explosions in a panic, but the explosions were only feeding the chaos, igniting the surrounding buildings. The heroes, Death Arms, Kamui Woods, Mount Lady, were standing back, helpless. "I can't get close," Kamui Woods shouted. "My wood will burn. I can't fit in the alley," Mount Lady cried. "The kid is exploding everything. We can't grab him." Izuku stared. Bakugo's eyes met his across the crowd. They were wide, filled with terror and suffocation. He's going to die. The thought was cold and sharp. The heroes are waiting for someone with the right quirk. They're waiting for water. Or wind. I don't have water. I have fire. But, Izuku remembered All Might's words. It is not the nature of the quirk that determines the hero. Fire controls fire. Stop! Kid, get back! Death Arms yelled as Izuku ducked under the police tape. Izuku ignored him. He sprinted toward the inferno. "Deku?" Bakugo's muffled voice choked out. Izuku skidded to a halt 10 meters from the villain. The heat was intense, but to Izuku, it felt like a warm breeze. He took a deep breath. "Hey! Uglier!" Izuku shouted. The sludge villain turned, his eyes narrowing. "You again?" "The brat with the lighter. Let him go," Izuku commanded. "Or what? You'll burn him? He's already blowing himself up. You add your fire to this, and you'll kill him." Izuku raised both hands. He didn't aim at the villain. He aimed at the fires raging on the buildings around them. "I'm not adding fire," Izuku muttered, his eyes glowing a luminous, spectral green. "I'm taking command. Pyrokinesis, domination." It was a technique he had only practiced on candle flames, never on a scale this massive. Izuku reached out with his mind, grabbing hold of the wild, chaotic orange flames eating the buildings. The fire obeyed. With a roar, the orange flames were ripped away from the walls. They swirled through the air, changing color, bleeding into the emerald green of Izuku's energy. He condensed the fire, pulling it all into a tight, spinning ring above the villain's head. The alleyway temperature dropped instantly as Izuku stole the heat source. The heroes watched in stunned silence. The boy was controlling the environment. "Now!" Izuku screamed, thrusting his hands forward. He didn't shoot fire. He used the ring of fire above to create a vacuum updraft. The sudden rush of hot air upwards pulled at the sludge, stretching it. "What?" The villain felt his grip loosen. Bakugo gasped, his mouth free for a split second. "Kaken! Aim for his eyes!" Izuku yelled. Bakugo didn't need to be told twice. Coughing, he ignited his sweat. But instead of a wild explosion, he focused it. A sharp, piercing blast hit the villain directly in the eye. The villain shrieked, recoiling. His grip faltered. Izuku moved. He propelled himself forward with a jet of fire from his feet, closing the distance in a blur. He grabbed Bakugo's arm. "Let go of him!" Izuku roared. He released a pulse of heat from his entire body, not enough to burn, but enough to flash boil the moisture in the sludge touching them. Steam exploded outward. The villain's hold broke. Izuku dragged Bakugo out of the sludge, using his fire thrusters to launch them both backward, skidding onto the pavement near the heroes. They tumbled to a stop. Bakugo was coughing violently. Izuku was panting, his hands smoking, his uniform singed. The sludge villain recovered, looming over them, massive and furious. "I'll kill you both!" Izuku scrambled to his feet, standing in front of Bakugo. He raised his fists. He was exhausted. He had overused his quirk. But he wouldn't run. "I won't let you," Izuku said, though his voice shook. The villain brought a massive tendril down. Smash! The wind returned. All Might appeared between the boys and the villain, blocking the strike with his forearm. He wasn't smiling. He looked furious, not at the boys, but at himself. "I'm really empathetic," All Might growled. "Preaching to a student while I make mistakes on the job." He grabbed the villain's tendril. Detroit. Smash! The punch changed the weather. The clouds above spiraled. Rain began to fall within seconds. The sludge villain was scattered to the winds, this time for good. The aftermath was a blur of flashing lights and police questions. The heroes were divided. Death Arms and Kamui Woods scolded Izuku for running into danger. You could have gotten yourself killed. That was reckless. But they couldn't hide the admiration in their voices. But that fire control, Kamui Woods muttered. You saved the buildings. You stopped the spread. That was pro-level utility. Bakugo sat on the back of an ambulance, a towel around his shoulders. He was quiet. He watched as the heroes praised Izuku's quirk, while simultaneously scolding him. Izuku finally pulled away from the police. He looked for All Might, but the hero had vanished into the press to avoid answering questions about his time limit. As Izuku began the walk home, the sun setting and casting long shadows, footsteps approached him rapidly. Deku! Izuku turned. Bakugo stood there. He looked disheveled, his eyes red, his pride visibly bruised. Kaken, Izuku said, stopping. Bakugo stood panting for a moment. He looked down at the ground, then up at Izuku. The jealousy was still there, but something else was mixed in now. Acknowledgement. I didn't ask for your help, Bakugo spat. And you didn't save me. I was fine. You looked like you were suffocating, Izuku said calmly. Shut up. Bakugo yelled. I'm just telling you one thing. You haven't won anything. Today didn't change anything. He pointed a finger at Izuku. I'm still going to be number one. I'm going to get into UA, and I'm going to crush you. Don't think just because you have a flashy fire trick that you're better than me. Izuku looked at his rival. For years, Bakugo had looked down on him. Now, Bakugo was looking at him. Izuku smiled. It wasn't a nervous smile. It was a competitive one. I'm going to UA too, Kaken, Izuku said, his fist igniting with a small, controlled green flame. And I'm not going to hold back anymore. If you want to be number one, you'll have to go through me. Bakugo stared at him, the challenge hanging in the air. He scoffed, turning on his heel. Just try not to burn the school down, nerd. Bakugo walked away. Izuku watched him go, the fire in his hand flickering out. He looked up at the twilight sky. The heat in his stomach, the dragon that had been sleeping there since he was 4 years old, felt different now. It wasn't heavy anymore. It felt ready. Izuku Midoriya took a step forward. The path to UA High, and the path to becoming the greatest hero, had truly begun. And for the first time, he knew he had the fire to light the way. The adrenaline from the sludge villain incident took hours to fade. When it finally did, it left Izuku Midoriya lying awake in his bed, staring at the All Might posters that plastered his ceiling. His hands were bandaged, minor burns from the friction of his own quirk pushing past its usual limits. But the pain was distant, overshadowed by a thrumming sense of purpose. He had saved Bakugo. He had controlled the flames. And All Might had told him he could be a hero. For years, Izuku had waited for permission to exist. Yesterday, he had received it. The next morning, the news was dominated by the incident. They called him the pyrokinesis kid, praising his quick thinking in containing the collateral damage. There were interviews with Kamui Woods and Death Arms, both begrudgingly admitting that without the Green Fire student, the city block would have been lost. But the most important conversation happened 2 days later, not on a screen, but on a secluded beach park filled with trash. Izuku was there to test his limits away from civilians. He was moving a rusted refrigerator, using a concentrated beam of heat to weld a handle onto it so he could drag it. Young Midoriya! Izuku jumped, the beam of fire sputtering out. He spun around to see a skeletal figure in a baggy yellow suit coughing into a handkerchief. All Might? Izuku stammered. He was still getting used to the hero's true form, which he had seen briefly after the ambulance ride. I've been looking for you, All Might said, wiping his mouth. I wanted to properly thank you for your action the other day. And to apologize again for my own negligence. You don't have to apologize, Izuku said quickly. You saved us in the end. That weather-changing smash, it was incredible. All Might sighed, leaning against a pile of tires. It was sloppy. I am fading, young Midoriya. My power is not what it once was. The hero looked at the boy, his sunken eyes serious. But that is why I am here. I saw something in you that day. A spark. Izuku's heart hammered against his ribs. Is this it? Is he going to offer to train me? You have a powerful quirk, All Might continued. A quirk that many would fear. But you used it to save, not to destroy. That mindset, it is rare. You have the heart of a pro. Thank you, Izuku breathed. I am currently looking for a successor, All Might revealed, the words heavy. Someone to inherit my will. For a moment, watching you rush in, I thought perhaps fate had placed you in my path. Izuku's eyes widened. Successor? However, All Might said, his voice gentle but firm. You have your own power. A power that rivals the top pros already. You have a path that is uniquely yours to walk. You don't need my power to become a symbol, Midoriya. You have your own fire. The words hung in the salty air. In another life, perhaps Izuku would have been quirkless. Perhaps he would have needed All Might's power to stand a chance. But in this life, the fire inside him was already roaring. All Might wasn't rejecting him. He was acknowledging him as an equal in the making. I understand, Izuku said, a determined smile breaking across his face. I'll make my own symbol. I'll be the hero who lights the way. All Might grinned, giving a thumbs up. I have no doubt. Go to Yue, young Midoriya. Show them what that fire can do. As All Might walked away, leaving Izuku to his training, the path of destiny split. Izuku Midoriya would not carry one for all. He would burn a path to the top with his own 2 hands. The Golden Boy. 3 days later, Toshinori Yagi, All Might, stood in the principal's office of Yue High. Sitting across from him was the small, chimera-like Principal Nizu, and standing by the window was Sir Nightai, All Might's former sidekick. You are running out of time, Toshi, Nightai said, adjusting his glasses. You cannot keep looking for a feeling. You need a concrete candidate. I know, Toshinori admitted, sinking into the sofa. I met a boy the other day. Incredible spirit. Powerful quirk. The sludge villain incident? Nizu asked, sipping tea. Midoriya Izuku. Yes, quite the spectacle. But he already has a quirk. One for all causes great strain on the body. Giving it to someone who already possesses a high-output mutant quirk, it could be dangerous. It might shorten their lifespan or drive them mad. Exactly, Nightai said. Which is why I have the perfect candidate. A student here at UA. A 3rd year next term. He is quirkless? No. But his quirk is difficult. He has struggled to master it. He has the body, the spirit, and the sheer tenacity you require. The door opened. A tall, muscular boy with blonde hair and a face like a Tintin cartoon walked in. He radiated an infectious, goofy optimism. Mirio Togata, the boy announced, striking a pose. Reporting for duty, sirs. All Might looked at the boy. He saw the scars on his arms from training. He felt the sheer presence of his physical strength. And when Mirio smiled, Toshinori saw a reflection of himself. He's ready, All Might thought. He doesn't need to be built up. He's already a vessel waiting to be filled. Young Togata, All Might stood up, his form buffing up into muscle mode for a brief second. Tell me, what is a hero to you? Mirio's smile didn't falter, but his eyes grew steel-hard. A hero is someone who saves everyone they can reach. I want to save 1 million people. All Might looked at Nightai, then back at Mirio. Well then, All Might said. Let's talk about your future. 10 months of heat. For Izuku, the 10 months leading up to the UA entrance exam were not spent cleaning a beach. They were spent in a different kind of hell. He didn't need muscle mass. He had been active all his life, and his body was naturally fit. His problem was thermoregulation. Izuku sat in the center of a specialized, fireproof industrial freezer his mother had rented time in at a local quirk gym. It was set to -20 degrees Celsius. He was naked from the waist up, shivering violently. Control it, he muttered, his teeth chattering. He ignited his left arm. Green flames licked up his shoulder. The cold air battled the heat. His quirk, pyrokinesis, was a double-edged sword. Unlike his father, who could breathe fire but had no resistance to external heat, or his mother, who could attract small objects, Izuku was a mutant hybrid. His skin was resistant to burns, but his internal organs were not. If he used his maximum output for more than 5 minutes, his body temperature would skyrocket past 42 degrees Celsius. Heat stroke was his greatest villain. He would get dizzy, his vision would blur, and eventually, he would pass out. Stabilize the core, he whispered. He had to learn to circulate the heat, venting it out of his pores constantly rather than letting it build up. It was like being a living radiator. He focused on the flame. He shaped it. First a ball. Then a pyramid. Then a thin, needle-like thread. Precision over power. Over the months, his training evolved. He studied physics. He studied aerodynamics. If I want to fly, Izuku wrote in his notebook, now titled Hero Analysis for the Future, my Quirk Volume 1, I can't just blast fire downward. That's inefficient. I need to vector the thrust. He spent weeks at the Dagoba Municipal Beach Park, not cleaning it, but using the trash heaps as an obstacle course. He would sprint, ignite his feet, and launch himself into the air. At first, he would face plant into piles of garbage. He burned his eyebrows off twice. But slowly, he got the hang of it. He learned to use short, controlled bursts, pulse jets, to change direction in midair. He learned to use his hands as stabilizers, like Iron Man, a pre-Quirk era comic book hero he adored. He also worked on his combat style. He wasn't a brawler like Bakugo. He didn't have the durability to take a punch from a strength enhancer. He had to be evasive. He developed a style he called Phantom Dancer. He would use heat haze to distort his position visually, creating mirages, while moving erratically with fire-boosted speed. By the time February arrived, the snow was falling on Musadofa City. Izuku stood outside his house, dressed in his black middle school uniform. Underneath, he wore a compression shirt designed to wick away sweat instantly. Sweat was dangerous. If it flash-boiled on his skin, it caused steam burns. Izuku? Inko Midoriya stood at the door, wringing her hands. Do you have your tissues? Your heat patches? Wait, no, cooling patches? I'm fine, Mom, Izuku smiled. He felt calm. The anxiety that used to cripple him was gone, burned away by 10 months of preparation. You look so cool, she whispered, tearing up. Go get them. I will. The gates of UA. The UA campus was massive. The glass walls of the main H-shaped building glittered in the winter sun. Students were swarming the entrance, a sea of black uniforms. Izuku walked with his head high. He saw students with mutant heads, floating objects, and giant limbs. But he didn't feel small. He felt the familiar warmth in his gut. Out of my way, Deku. The voice was low and rough. Izuku didn't flinch. He sidestepped, letting Katsuki Bakugo pass. Good morning, Kaken, Izuku said pleasantly. Bakugo stopped. He turned, eyeing Izuku up and down. Since the sludge incident, their relationship had shifted into a cold war. Bakugo hadn't bullied him, but he had trained like a demon. The circles under Bakugo's eyes spoke of sleepless nights and endless explosions. Don't think you're safe just because you got lucky once, Bakugo growled. I'm going to set a record today that you can't touch. We'll see, Izuku replied. Bakugo scoffed and stomped away. Izuku took a deep breath and stepped forward. However, the pavement was icy. His foot slipped. Crap. He flailed, gravity taking hold. He was about to faceplant right before the biggest exam of his life. Reflexes. He didn't panic. He snapped his fingers on his right hand. A tiny, compressed burst of air and heat popped beneath his palm, creating a cushion of pressure. It wasn't enough to fly, but it was enough to stop his fall. He hovered for a split second, an inch from the ground, before righting himself with a graceful flip. Whoa! A girl with a round face and brown bobbed hair was standing there, blinking. She had been reaching out to catch him with her quirk but stopped when she saw him recover. That was amazing! She chirped. You're like a cat. Are you okay? Izuku straightened his uniform. Ah, yes. Ice. Tricky. I'm Uraraka Ochako, she beamed. You look confident. Let's do our best. Midoriya Izuku, he nodded. Good luck, Uraraka-san. She waved and ran off. Izuku watched her go. He realized with a start that he hadn't stuttered. He hadn't frozen up. I really have changed. The written exam. The written portion was a breeze. Izuku had always been top of his class academically. While Bakugo was a genius at combat instinct, Izuku was a genius of analysis. He dissected the questions about Quirk laws, history, and mathematics with surgical precision. He finished 20 minutes early and spent the rest of the time sketching a new costume design that incorporated cooling vents in the ribs. The practical exam. Welcome to the live battle show. Present Mick's voice boomed through the auditorium. Izuku sat next to Bakugo, which was awkward, but they were assigned by student ID numbers. The task is simple. 10 minutes. Mach City. Robots. Smash M, bash M, crash M. Izuku listened intently. 3 types of robots. 1 point, 2 points, 3 points. Mobility is key, Izuku analyzed, muttering under his breath. The city is large. If the robots are spread out, speed is more valuable than raw power. I need to get to the high ground immediately to locate targets. Shut up, Bakugo hissed. Your muttering is heating up the air. Sorry. And the 4th robot type? A student with glasses and blue hair stood up, chopping his hand stiffly. The pamphlet says 0 points. If this is a mistake, it is highly shameful for you, And you, he pointed at Izuku. You've been muttering this whole time. If you're here to distract us, leave. The auditorium turned to look at Izuku. Izuku stood up. He didn't shrink back. I'm muttering because I'm planning my strategy, Izuku said, his voice carrying clearly. Knowing the enemy is half the battle. As for the 0-pointer, Present Mike was getting to it. It's likely an obstacle to be avoided, a force of nature hazard to test situational awareness. He sat down. The blue-haired boy, Tenya Ida, looked stunned, then bowed. I see. Sharp intuition, Present Mike grinned. Correctamundo, listener 2234. The 0-pointer is a gimmick. Avoid it and rack up points. After the briefing, the students were separated onto buses. Izuku glanced at his card. Battle Center B. Bakugo leaned over, looked at the card, and clicked his tongue. Center A. Tisk, looks like I can't crush you directly. Don't die, Deku. You either Kakin. Battle Center B. The Mach City was enormous. Skyscrapers, streets, traffic lights. It was a perfect replica of an urban district. Izuku stood at the heavy iron gates, surrounded by other examinees. He saw Uraraka nearby, taking deep breaths. He saw the strict boy with glasses, Ida, stretching his engines. He saw a boy with a laser belt. They were all nervous. Izuku was vibrating. He wore a dark green tracksuit with yellow lines. He had modified the shoes with metal soles to withstand the heat of his propulsion. Start strong. Establish dominance over the airspace. Start. Present Mick's voice screamed from the observation tower. There are no countdowns in real battles. Go! 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 While the other students were still processing the command, Izuku moved. Ignition. Green flames roared from his feet. He didn't run, he launched. He shot over the heads of the stunned examinees, leaving a trail of emerald smoke. He cleared the gate in a single leap, landing on a lamppost, then bouncing off it to the second story of a building. The other students were scrambling on the ground. Izuku was already on the rooftops. Target acquired. A 3-pointer, a massive tank-like drone, rolled out of an alleyway below. Izuku dove from the roof. Gravity pulled him down, but fire pushed him faster. He became a green comet. Flash fire, heel drop. He spun in the air, coating his right leg in condensed, superheated plasma. He slammed his heel into the robot's metal chassis. Crunch. The metal melted instantly upon contact, the kinetic force enhanced by the jet propulsion. The robot crumpled, exploding into scrap. 3 points, Izuku said, landing in a crouch. He didn't stop. He checked his periphery. 2 1-pointers to the left. 1 2-pointer on the fire escape. He extended his hands like pistols. Bang! Bang! 2 concentrated bullets of fire shot from his fingers, piercing the sensors of the 1-pointers. They short-circuited and collapsed. He spun, unleashing a wave of heat that knocked the 2-pointer off the fire escape. 7 points. 30 seconds elapsed. Izuku grinned. This was fun. The observation room. In a dark room filled with screens, the UA staff watched the chaos unfolds. This year's batch is spirited, Midnight commented, licking her lips. Look at the explosion boy in Center A. He's feral. And the engine boy in Center B, Cementos noted. Excellent mobility. But a small voice piped up. Principal Niza pointed a paw at a screen in the center. What about him? On the screen, a blur of green light was zigzagging between buildings. Midoriya Izuku, Aizawa Shota muttered, reading the file. Quirk, pyrokinesis. Registered as a mutant emitter type. His spatial awareness is top tier, Snipe noted. He's not just destroying, he's clearing zones. He's taking the high ground to avoid friendly fire. He knows fire is dangerous to allies. He has 45 points already, Midnight said. He's in the lead for Center B. Power and control, All Might whispered from the back of the room, swelling with pride. He's flying. Well then, Niza smiled, his hand hovering over a big red button. Let's see how they handle despair. Click. The 0-pointer. The ground shook. Izuku had just melted the tracks off a 3-pointer when he felt the tremor. It wasn't a vibration, it was an earthquake. Dust clouds billowed from the north end of the city. Buildings groaned and collapsed. From the dust emerged a nightmare. The 0-pointer was colossal. It was taller than the skyscrapers. Its single red eye scanned the street, and its massive metal hand crushed a building like it was cardboard. The students panicked. Run! It's huge! That's not an obstacle, that's a monster! The crowd turned and fled. It was a stampede. Izuku stood on a rooftop, watching the Titan approach. The heat of the destruction washed over him. That's too big. I can't melt that. It would take too long. His instincts told him to run. That was the logical move. He had 60 points. He was safe. He turned to leave. Oh wow! The cry was faint, buried under the sound of crumbling concrete. Izuku froze. His head snapped back toward the danger. Through the dust, he saw her. The girl with the bobbed hair. Uraraka. She was trapped under a pile of rubble in the middle of the street, right in the path of the 0-pointer. The robot raised its foot. It was going to crush her. Logic died. The fire in Izuku's gut roared. It wasn't the calm, controlled flame he had trained with. It was the wild, protective inferno from his childhood. Save her. Izuku didn't think about points. He didn't think about UA. He ignited. Max output. The flames that erupted from him were blinding. The green turned almost white at the core. The concrete beneath his feet turned to glass. He blasted off. The sound barrier broke with a deafening crack. He crossed the distance in a heartbeat. He didn't go for Uraraka. There was no time to lift the rubble. He had to stop the foot. He flew straight up, aiming for the robot's face. Warning, overheat imminent, his brain screamed. He could feel his skin prickling, his vision swimming. I don't care. He reached the robot's eye level. He was a speck of green light against the massive metal machine. He pulled his right arm back. He channeled every ounce of heat, every flicker of energy in his body into his fist. The air around his arm warped and twisted. Prominence. Lance, he punched the air. A beam of concentrated, spiraling fire, thick as a telephone pole and hot as a star, erupted from his fist. It struck the 0-pointer directly in its central processor unit, just below the red eye. There was no explosion. Just the sound of metal screaming as it vaporized. The beam punched clean through the robot's head, exiting out the back and piercing the clouds above. The massive machine groaned. Its circuitry melted. The red eye flickered and died. The momentum of the foot stopped, hovering just 10 feet above the terrified Uraraka. The giant tilted backward. Boom! It crashed into the street, lifeless. Izuku hovered in the air for a second, the smoke clearing around him. His arm was smoking, his sleeve burned away. His skin was angry red. He coughed, the adrenaline fading. Oh crap! Gravity remembered him. His flames sputtered out. He began to fall from 20 stories up. I can't, reignite, too hot. He tumbled, the ground rushing up. He closed his eyes, bracing for impact. Slap. He stopped. He opened his eyes. He was floating 3 feet off the ground. Uraraka, battered and covered in dust, had her hands pressed together, her fingertips touching. She looked sick, but she was smiling. Release, she wheezed. Izuku dropped the last 3 feet, landing on his butt. The silence in the battle center was absolute. The other students who had been running were now stopped, staring slack-jawed at the fallen titan and the boy who had executed it. "Time's up!" President Mike yelled. Izuku lay back on the pavement, staring at the sky. It was blue. It was beautiful. "Nice catch," he whispered to Uraraka. "Nice punch," she whispered back, before turning green and vomiting rainbow glitter. 1 week later, Izuku sat at the dinner table, staring at the fish his mother had cooked. He couldn't eat. The letter from Yue had arrived. He went to his room, hands shaking, and tore open the envelope. A holographic disc fell out. It activated. All Might appeared on the screen, wearing a yellow suit that was far too large for him. "I am here!" "As a projection," Izuku gasped. "Young Midoriya!" All Might boomed. "You did well on the written exam. Passing marks. But the practical, oh boy." The screen changed to show the leaderboard. Izuku Midoriya, villain points 60, rescue points 0. Izuku's heart sank. He had stopped attacking robots to save Uraraka. He had wasted time. "Wait." All Might raised a hand. "A hero's job is to save people. Do you think a hero course would reject someone who risked everything to save another?" The score flipped. Rescue points 60. Total 120 points. 60 rescue points. All Might shouted. The judges were blown away. "And with your villain score, that makes you the top scorer of the entrance exam." Izuku covered his mouth, tears streaming down his face. "But that's not all." All Might pointed at the camera. "Look at this." A video clip played. It was Uraraka, standing in the negotiation room. "Please," she told President Mike. "Give him some of my points. He saved me. I would have been crushed if he hadn't. If he hadn't done that amazing fire thing." "She tried to negotiate for you," All Might said softly. "But she didn't need to. You passed with flying colors, Midoriya Izuku." All Might extended a hand toward the screen. "Come, young Midoriya. This is your hero academia." The hologram faded. Izuku sat in the dark, the green glow of the projector fading. He clenched his fist. A small, controlled flame ignited over his knuckles. "I did it," he whispered. The twist. The next day, the class rankings were posted online. 1. Midoriya Izuku 120 PTS. 2. Bakugo Katsuki 77 PTS. 3. Kirishima Aijiro 74 PTS. In the Bakugo household, a phone was smashed against the wall. "DKU!" Bakugo screamed, explosions popping all over his room. "He beat me? By almost double?" Bakugo panted, staring at the shattered screen. His eyes were wild. He held back, Bakugo realized, his voice trembling with rage. "All this time, he's been looking down on me." The rivalry had shifted. It wasn't just competition anymore. It was war, and somewhere in the city, a boy named Mirio Togata was phasing through a wall, clutching his own acceptance letter, unaware that he and the Boy of Fire were destined to fight side by side against the coming darkness. The path had diverged, but the destination remained the same. The Age of Heroes was about to heat up. The massive steel gates of Battle Center loomed overhead, casting long, imposing shadows over the crowd of teenagers gathered at their base. The air was crisp, the February chill biting at exposed skin, but Izuku Midoriya didn't feel the cold. He felt the hum. It was a low, vibrational frequency deep in his solar plexus, the pilot light of his quirk waiting to be roared into an inferno. He stood near the front of the pack, rolling his shoulders to loosen the tension in his trapezius muscles. He wore a simple dark green tracksuit, but his shoes were custom-modified, thick, reinforced soles made of a tungsten alloy designed to withstand extreme temperatures, with vents along the heel to channel propulsion. Around him, the nervous energy was palpable. A boy with engines in his calves was doing high knee stretches, muttering about optimal gear ratios. A girl with earphone jacks hanging from her lobes was tapping her foot anxiously. Near the back, Ochako Uraraka was taking deep, shaky breaths, looking like she might be sick. Izuku checked his compression sleeves one last time. They were designed to wick away sweat instantly. Sweat was the enemy. If it pooled on his skin when he ignited, it would flash boil, causing steam burns. The layout is dense urban, Izuku analyzed, his eyes scanning the tops of the mock skyscrapers visible over the wall. Narrow streets. Lots of verticality. The robots will likely be ground-based, meaning the rooftops are the safest vantage point. If I stay on the ground, I risk bottlenecking with other students. If I go high, I control the battlefield. You there? Izuku blinked, snapping out of his muttering. The tall, bespectacled boy from the auditorium, Tenya Ida, was marching toward him. You are the one who was muttering earlier, Ida stated, his hand chopping the air stiffly. You seem calm. Are you not taking this seriously? This is the premier hero institution in the country. Izuku looked up at him, his green eyes sharp and clear. I'm taking it very seriously. That's why I'm already mapping out the most efficient route to the city center. Ida paused, his glasses glinting. Mapping out. But the exam hasn't started. The layout is a standard urban grid, Izuku replied, pointing to the visible skyline. Look at the density of the buildings. The larger robots, the 3-pointers, will be restricted to the main avenues. The 1-pointers will be fast and likely in the alleys. To maximize points, you need to hit the intersections where they converge. Ida stared at him, stunned. Before he could respond, the loudspeaker crackled. And start. President Mick's voice exploded over the battle center, loud enough to rattle teeth. What's wrong? There are no countdowns in real fights. Run! 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 The crowd of examinees hesitated for a split second, their brains processing the sudden command. Izuku didn't hesitate. Ignition. The air around Izuku's feet warped instantly. A roar, like a jet engine spinning up, erupted from his soles. 2 concentrated pillars of emerald fire blasted downward. Boom! Izuku launched. He didn't run through the gates. He flew over them. While the other students were just beginning to sprint, creating a chaotic bottleneck at the entrance, Izuku was already 30 feet in the air, a streak of green light arcing over the walls. He left a trail of shimmering heat haze and green smoke in his wake. He's flying? Someone shouted from the ground. Ida watched the green comet disappear into the city. He didn't even touch the ground. The city center. The wind whipped against Izuku's face, stinging his eyes, but the heat radiating from his body kept him warm. He crested the first row of buildings, his eyes scanning the streets below like a hawk. There, 3 blocks down, a cluster of 1-pointer robots, small, unicycle-based drones, were patrolling an intersection. Izuku cut the fuel to his left foot and increased the output on his right, executing a sharp aerial banking turn. He dove. Gravity took hold, pulling him down toward the pavement. The wind roared in his ears. As he plummeted, he extended his right hand, fingers splayed. Fire control, scattershot. Small beads of superheated plasma formed at his fingertips. He flicked his wrist. Thwip. 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 The beads shot forward faster than bullets. They struck the 1-pointers with pinpoint accuracy, melting through their central sensor eyes instantly. The robots sparked, spun out of control, and crashed into each other. 3 points. Izuku pulled up just 10 feet above the street, engaging his thrusters to hover. He didn't land. Landing wasted time. A massive crash echoed from the adjacent street. A 2-pointer, a scorpion-like machine, burst through a wall, debris flying everywhere. Izuku spun in midair. The robot locked onto him. Target acquired, the machine droned, raising its tail laser. Too slow, Izuku grunted. He clapped his hands together, then pulled them apart as if holding an invisible ball. Between his palms, a swirling vortex of fire compressed into a dense sphere. Flash fire impact. He thrust his palms forward. The sphere expanded into a wave of concussive heat. It slammed into the 2-pointer, not just burning it, but hitting it with the force of a truck. The metal chassis glowed cherry red, then buckled inward. The robot was blasted backward, pinning it against the concrete wall where it slumped, deactivated. 5 points. Okay, Izuku breathed, feeling the first bead of sweat roll down his forehead. Rhythm established. Keep moving. Keep the temperature steady. He blasted off again, rocketing down the main avenue. Behind him, the other students were finally arriving. He could hear explosions, shouting, and the crunch of metal. But Izuku was already a block ahead. He was the vanguard, the observation room. In the darkened monitoring room, dozens of screens illuminated the faces of the UA faculty. They watched the chaotic sprawl of the exam with critical eyes. Battle Center A is chaotic, Midnight noted, tapping a screen where explosions were rocking the foundations of buildings. Bakugo Katsuki. He's destructive. Maybe a little too destructive. He's taking out robots, but he's damaging the infrastructure heavily. Efficiency is key, Cementos rumbled. Look at Center B. On the main screen, a green blur was weaving through the skyline. Midoriya Izuku, Niza said, his paws resting on the console. Quirk, pyrokinesis. A powerful emitter-mutant hybrid. He's avoiding the ground, Vlad King observed. Smart. He's using verticality to isolate targets. And look at his attacks. He's not incinerating the whole street. He's using concentrated beams to target weak points, joints, sensors, power cores. Precision, Aizawa murmured from the back, his eyes narrowed. Fire is a wild element. Usually, kids with this kind of output burn everything around them in a panic. This kid, he's restraining himself. He has to, Recovery Girl chimed in. Look at his thermals. She pointed to a biometric readout. His body temperature is rising. If he goes full blast, he'll cook his own brain. He's fighting the robots and his own biology at the same time. All Might stood in the corner, his skeletal hands gripping the railing. He watched Izuku dive bomb a three-pointer, melting its treads before kicking it over with a jet-assisted roundhouse. He's flying, All Might whispered, a swell of pride in his chest. He's actually flying. He's currently at 48 points, Niza noted. Top of the leaderboard for this center. But, let's see how he handles a situation he can't just burn through. The principal grinned, a manic glint in his beady eyes. His hand hovered over a large red button encased in plastic. Release the villain. Click. The crisis. Izuku touched down on a rooftop to catch his breath. He was panting. His skin felt hot, like he had been sitting in a sauna for too long. He checked his internal clock. 7 minutes elapsed. I have roughly 55 points. That should be a passing grade, but I can't be sure of the cutoff. He wiped his forehead. His vision swam slightly, a warning sign of heat exhaustion. I need to cool down. Maybe I should coast for the last 3 minutes, just assist others. Rumble. The vibration started in the soles of his feet. Then, the water in the rooftop reservoir rippled. Then came the sound. It was a grinding, metallic screech that sounded like the earth itself was being torn open. Izuku spun toward the north end of the mock city. Dust billowed into the sky, blotting out the sun. From the cloud, a hand emerged. It was the size of a bus. The hand slammed into a skyscraper, shattering glass and crumbling concrete. The building groaned and tipped, crashing into the street below. Through the dust, the zero-pointer revealed itself. It was a colossus. A mechanical titan standing nearly 20 stories tall. Its treaded base crushed cars flat. Its multiple red eyes glowed with menacing indifference. What is that? Izuku breathed, his jaw dropping. Down on the street, the panic was instant. It's the zero-pointer. Run! Get out of the way. This is crazy. They'll kill us. The examinees broke rank. It was a stampede. Students scrambled over debris, using their quirks to flee as fast as possible. The robot moved slowly, but its stride was immense. Every time it moved, debris rained down like mortar fire. Izuku stood frozen on the roof. President Mike said it's an obstacle to avoid. There's no point in fighting it. It gives 0 points. It's a waste of energy and a massive risk. Logic dictates retreat. Izuku turned away. He prepared to ignite his thrusters and fly to the safety of the entrance gate. Oh wow! The cry was faint, barely audible over the grinding gears of the Titan. But Izuku heard it. He stopped. He looked down. In the middle of the main avenue, directly in the path of the zero-pointer, a pile of rubble lay scattered. Trapped underneath a slab of concrete was a girl with bobbed brown hair, Uraraka. She was struggling, trying to lift the slab, but her leg was pinned. She looked up, terror etched on her face as the shadow of the zero-pointer's foot fell over her. The robot raised its massive leg. It was going to step right there. In 5 seconds she would be crushed. The other students were running away. Even Ida, the strict rule follower, was sprinting toward the exit, shouting for everyone to evacuate. No one saw her, or if they did, they were too scared to act. Izuku looked at the exit. Then he looked at the girl. The heat in his gut flared. It wasn't the uncomfortable heat of exhaustion anymore. It was a searing, white-hot spike of adrenaline. The body moves before the mind can think. No! Izuku screamed. Max output. Ignition. The roof beneath Izuku didn't just scorch, it melted. A circle of tar turned into boiling sludge as Izuku exploded upward. The sound barrier shattered. Boom! He was a green streak, a missile of pure determination cutting through the dust. He didn't fly toward Uraraka to pull her out. There wasn't time. The foot was already descending. He couldn't lift the rubble and carry her away in 2 seconds. He had to stop the foot. He flew straight at the robot. The heat was agonizing. His skin felt like it was splitting. His vision turned red at the edges. Warning. Critical overheat. System failure imminent. Shut up! Izuku roared at his own biology. Just hold on for one more shot. He shot past the robot's knee, climbing higher. He needed a vital spot. The legs were too thick. The body was too armored, the head. The CPU. He reached the Titan's face. He was a speck of light against a mountain of steel. The robot's red eyes swiveled to focus on the annoyance buzzing around it. Izuku stopped his forward momentum, hovering in front of the machine's face. He brought his right arm back. He channeled everything. Every ounce of fire, every calorie of energy, every frustration and ambition he had held for 10 years. He condensed the flame around his arm until it wasn't fire anymore. It was plasma. It was a miniature sun, blindingly white with a green corona. The air around him warped, the oxygen igniting instantly. I won't let you hurt her! Izuku screamed. He punched the empty air. Prominence. Lance! A beam of superheated destruction erupted from his fist. It wasn't a scattershot. It wasn't a wave. It was a lance, a focused, coherent beam of energy thick as a redwood tree. The beam struck the zero-pointer directly between its eyes. Jum! There was no explosion. The heat was so intense it bypassed the explosive threshold and went straight to vaporization. The beam punched through the robot's faceplate, melted the central processor, incinerated the internal wiring, and blasted out the back of the robot's skull, piercing the clouds above. The sky split open. A hole was punched through the overcast clouds, letting a single ray of sunlight shine through. The zero-pointer froze. Its lights died. The massive foot, hovering just 10 feet above Uraraka, stopped its descent. The machine groaned, the sound of cooling metal, and then tipped backward. Thump! It crashed into the street, sending up a final cloud of dust, but Uraraka was safe. High in the air, Izuku's flame sputtered. The backlash hit him. His arm was black with soot, his sleeve disintegrated. His entire body was smoking. He felt lightheaded. The world spun. I did it. His eyes rolled back. He began to fall. He plummeted from the sky, a ragdoll dropping from 20 stories up. Slap! Suddenly his descent stopped. He jerked in midair, floating weightlessly. Uraraka, covered in dust and grime, stood on top of a pile of debris. She had slapped her hands together, her face pale green. Release! She wheezed. Izuku dropped the last 3 feet, landing softly on the broken pavement. He groaned, clutching his arm. Uraraka stumbled over to him. Are you okay? That was, oh my god. Izuku blinked, trying to focus. Did you get hurt? Uraraka stared at him. Tears welled up in her eyes. You saved me. You blew its head off. Around them, the other students began to emerge from their hiding spots. They stared at the fallen giant, smoke pouring from the hole in its head. They stared at the boy lying on the ground, steam rising from his skin. That guy. He took out the zero-pointer. With one shot? Time's up. Present Mike yelled. The siren wailed. Izuku let his head fall back against the concrete. The heat was fading, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. But he smiled. He hadn't run. Recovery and results. The infirmary smelled of antiseptic and gummy bears. You reckless child, recovery girl scolded, smacking Izuku on the shin with her cane. You pushed your body temperature to 43 degrees. You could have suffered permanent brain damage. Or organ failure. I'm sorry, Izuku mumbled, sipping a hydration pouch. I had to. You have a powerful quirk, the old woman sighed, kissing his forehead to accelerate the healing of his minor burns. But power without endurance is just a firework. You need better cooling systems if you want to be a pro. Yes, ma'am. Izuku walked out of the exam site an hour later, bandaged and tired. He didn't see Bakugo. He just wanted to go home and sleep for a week. 1 week later, the envelope felt heavy in his hands. Izuku sat at his desk. His mother was pacing outside the door. He could hear her muttering prayers to every deity she knew. He tore the seal. A metal disc slid out onto his desk. BZZZT. A hologram sprang to life. I am here. Izuku jumped back, nearly knocking over his chair. All Might? The number 1 hero filled the small projection, wearing a yellow suit that hung loosely on his gaunt frame. Young Midoriya. All Might boomed. You have been waiting. And I am here to deliver the results. All Might cleared his throat, leaning closer to the camera. First, the written exam. You passed with flying colors. But that is not why you are here. You want to know about the battle. The screen shifted. A leaderboard appeared. Midoriya Izuku, villain points, 65. 65 points. All Might shouted. An impressive score. You neutralized robots with efficiency and precision. By this metric alone, you would have passed. Izuku let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He had passed. But... All Might raised a finger. The hero course is not just about fighting villains. What kind of hero ignores those in need? The screen changed again. A video clip played. It was Uraraka, standing in the negotiation room, pleading with President Mike. Please! Can you give him some of my points? He saved me. I would have been crushed. At least give him the points for the big robot. Izuku felt a lump in his throat. She had tried to help him. You acted without hesitation, All Might said, his voice softening. You faced an overwhelming threat to save a stranger. That is the essence of a hero. The scoreboard updated. Rescue points, 60. Total score, 125 points. 125 points. All Might roared. This is a Yui record. You didn't just pass, young Midoriya. You dominated. All Might extended a hand toward the screen. Come, Midoriya Izuku. This is your hero academia. The hologram faded. Izuku sat there in the silence of his room. He looked at his hand. He clenched it into a fist, and a small, green flame ignited over his knuckles. It wasn't wild. It was steady. It was controlled. I did it, he whispered. Tears streaming down his face. Mom! I got in. The Bakugo household. Across town, the atmosphere was very different. Katsuki Bakugo sat on his bed, his phone in his hand. The screen displayed the full ranking list that had just been uploaded to the student portal. 1. Midoriya Izuku 125 PTS, villain, 65/rescue, 60. 2. Bakugo Katsuki 77 PTS, villain, 77/rescue, 0. 3. Kirishima Ijiro 39 PTS, 4. Uraraka Ochako 28 PTS. Bakugo stared at the numbers. 77. He had destroyed more robots than anyone. He had been a force of nature. He had laughed as he tore through the mock city, and he had lost, not by a few points. By nearly 50. Deku. Bakugo's grip tightened on the phone. The glass screen cracked. Villain points, and rescue points? Bakugo whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and confusion. He saved people? While I was just breaking things? He remembered the sludge villain. He remembered Deku stepping in to control the fire, saving the buildings. He's not just strong, Bakugo realized, a cold dread settling in his stomach. He's playing a different game. Smoke curled from Bakugo's palms. Don't screw with me. Bakugo screamed, hurling the phone against the wall. Boom. An explosion rocked his bedroom, scorching the wallpaper. I won't lose to him, he panted, staring at the charred spot on the wall. The rivalry that had been a simple annoyance was now a desperate war. Deku wasn't the pebble on the side of the road anymore. He was the mountain Bakugo had to climb, and for the first time in his life, Katsuki Bakugo wasn't sure if he was the protagonist of this story. UA High Teacher's Lounge. Aizawa Shoda looked at the file on his desk. The picture of the green-haired boy stared back at him. Midoriya Izuku, Aizawa muttered. Record-breaking score. Powerful quirk. But reckless. He tapped the paper. If he can't learn to cool down, he's going to burn out before he hits 20. I'll have to keep a close eye on this one. He looked at the next file. Bakugo Katsuki. And this one creates a different kind of heat. Aizawa sighed, zipping up his yellow sleeping bag. This year is going to be a headache. The morning sun of April hit the glass facade of Yue High School, turning the H-shaped building into a glittering monument of heroism. For thousands of students across Japan, this building was a dream. For Izuku Midoriya, walking through the massive gates, it was a testing ground. He adjusted the strap of his yellow backpack, feeling the reassuring weight of his notebooks. His uniform, gray blazer, dark turquoise trousers, and red tie, was crisp, pressed by his mother the night before with tearful diligence. Izuku, are you sure it's fireproof? She had asked, hovering over him with an iron. The school uses reinforced polyfiber, Mom. It won't burn unless I really lose control, he had assured her. Now, standing on the campus grounds, Izuku took a deep breath. The air smelled of cherry blossoms and opportunity. He wasn't the trembling, quirkless boy of a different reality. He was the top scorer of the entrance exam. He had a dragon in his gut, and 10 months of hellish training in his legs. He checked the map on his phone. Class 1A. He navigated the labyrinthine hallways, noting the size of everything. The doors were massive, built to accommodate gigantification quirks or mutation types. It was a subtle reminder, you are not in junior high anymore. You are among monsters. He found the door. A giant 1A was painted on it in red. Here we go, he whispered. He slid the door open. Remove your foot from the desk. Ha! It is disrespectful to the UA upperclassmen and the people who made this desk. Disrespectful? What junior high did you go to, you 2-bit extra? Izuku sighed. The voices were familiar. Inside, Tenya Ida, the stiff, bespectacled boy from the exam, was gesturing robotically at Katsuki Bakugo. Bakugo sat with his feet propped up on the desk, leaning back with an air of regal boredom. Ida noticed the door open and spun around. Ah! It's you! The sudden attention made the class turn. 20 faces looked at him. Midoriya Izuku, Ida said, marching over. I am Ida Tenya, from semi-private academy. I know, Izuku said, offering a small smile. I heard you at the exam. Nice to meet you, Ida-kun. I must apologize, Ida said, bowing slightly. I misjudged you during the entrance test. I thought you were merely muttering to be disruptive, but you had already perceived the true nature of the exam. Your tactical awareness regarding the rescue points was superior to my own. I hate to admit it, but you are the better student. Izuku scratched the back of his head. I wouldn't go that far. I just reacted. Deku. The voice cut through the polite atmosphere like a serrated blade. Izuku looked past Ida. Bakugo was staring at him. His red eyes were narrowed, his expression unreadable. It wasn't the usual explosive rage. It was a cold, simmering calculation. Kaken, Izuku nodded, his voice steady. Don't think 125 points makes you the boss, Bakugo growled, lowering his feet slowly. You just got lucky with a big target. Luck implies I didn't aim, Izuku replied calmly. The air in the classroom thickened. The other students watched, sensing the history between the two. Oh! It's the messy hair boy. The tension broke as a bubbly face popped up behind Izuku. It was Ochako Uraraka. You passed. I knew you would. She beamed, punching the air. Your punch on that giant robot was incredible. Whoosh! And then the beam went jam. It was amazing. Izuku felt a flush of heat in his cheeks, though he suppressed his quirk's urge to flare up. Uraraka-san. I'm glad you got in too. Your infinity quirk is really versatile. I'm just glad you didn't turn into a puddle of goo after falling, she laughed. So, is this the ceremony? I wonder what our teacher is like. If you're here to make friends, pack up and leave. The voice came from the floor. The students froze. Slowly, they looked down. Lying in the doorway, encased in a bright yellow sleeping bag like a monolithic caterpillar, was a man. He had messy black hair, tired eyes, and stubble that suggested he hadn't slept in a week. He sucked on a jelly pouch with grim efficiency. It took you 8 seconds to quiet down, the man said, unzipping the sleeping bag and standing up. He wore all black and a capture scarf around his neck. Time is a limited resource. You kids aren't rational enough. He stepped out of the bag. I'm your homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa. Homeroom teacher? The class exclaimed in unison. He doesn't look like a pro hero, a small boy with purple balls on his head whispered. Aizawa reached into his sleeping bag and pulled out a stack of blue gym uniforms. Put these on and meet me on the grounds, he ordered, turning his back. We're doing a Quirk apprehension test. The grounds. The P grounds were vast, a wide expanse of dirt, and tracks surrounded by the gleaming towers of UA. The April wind was brisk, but the sun was high. The class of 1A stood in a cluster, wearing their blue tracksuits. They looked confused. A Quirk apprehension test? Uraraka asked. But what about the entrance ceremony? The orientation? Aizawa stood with his back to them, looking at the horizon. If you're going to be a hero, you don't have time for such leisurely events. He turned, his dark eyes sweeping over them. UA's selling point is freedom. That applies to the teachers as well. He held up a softball. Softball throw, standing long jump, 50-meter dash, endurance running, grip strength, upper body training, seated toe touch, and sit-ups. You did these in middle school, right? No quirks allowed. He tossed the ball in his hand. The country still insists on prohibiting quirks when calculating the average of physical records. It's not rational. The Ministry of Education is procrastinating. Aizawa pointed a finger at the center of the group. Bakugo. You finished second in the practical exam, right? TCH. Bakugo clicked his tongue, glaring sideways at Izuku. Second place. In junior high, what was your best result for the softball throw? 67 meters. Try it with your quirk, Aizawa said, tossing him the ball. You can do whatever you want as long as you stay in the circle. Bakugo walked into the circle. He stretched his arms, a feral grin spreading across his face. Don't hold back, huh? Bakugo muttered. He wound up. I'll show them. I'll show Deku the difference in raw power. Die. Boom. A massive explosion erupted from his palm as he released the ball. The blast wave kicked up dust, and the ball rocketed into the sky, trailing smoke. Die. Izuku murmured. Aizawa held up a digital device. It beeped. He turned it to show the class. 705.2 meters. Whoa! 700 meters? That's crazy. This looks like fun. A pink-skinned girl cheered. We can use our quirks as much as we want? Aizawa's expression darkened. The corners of his mouth twitched into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was a predator's smile. Fun, you say? The temperature in the area seemed to drop. You have 3 years to become a hero. Will you have an attitude like that the whole time? Aizawa pocketed his hands. All right. Whoever comes in last place in all 8 tests will be judged to have no potential. He brushed his hair back, his eyes glowing red for a split second, and will be punished with immediate expulsion. Expulsion? The class screamed. It's the first day of school. Uraraka cried out. That's too unfair. Natural disasters, big accidents, selfish villains, Aizawa listed, his voice monotone. Calamities whose time or place can't be predicted. Japan is covered in unfairness. Heroes are the ones who reverse those situations. He stared them down. If you wanted to go to Mickey D's after school with your friends, that's too bad. For the next 3 years, Yui will do everything it can to crush you. Go beyond. Plus ultra. He beckoned with one finger. Overcome it with everything you've got. Izuku clenched his fists. He felt the heat in his stomach stir. He wasn't scared. He was analyzing. Expulsion. It's a harsh metric. But looking at his eyes, he means it. He wants to weed out those who are here for the fame or the fun. He wants soldiers. Izuku looked at Bakugo, who was stretching his triceps. He looked at Ida, who was checking his engines. I have to be smart. My quirk generates heat. If I overuse it in the early tests, I'll overheat before the final ones. I need to pace myself. Test 1, 50-meter dash. The students lined up in pairs. First up were Ida and a girl with a frog quirk, Ajuri. On your mark. Get set. Pow! The robot camera signaled. Vroom. Ida's engines roared. He crossed the line in a blur. 3.04 seconds, the robot announced. Like a fish in water, Ajri commented, hopping across in 5.58 seconds. He's fast, Izuku noted. Reciprocating engines in the calves. High torque. Next pair, Uraraka and Ojiro, tail boy. Uraraka made her clothes weightless to run faster. 7.15 seconds. Then Bakugo versus Midoriya. The class went quiet. They had sensed the tension earlier. This was the first direct comparison. Don't cry when you eat my dust, Deku, Bakugo growled, crouching low. Focus on your own lane, Kaken, Izuku replied, staring straight ahead. Start. Boom. Bakugo launched himself backward with explosions, propelling himself forward with incredible speed. Izuku didn't run. Flash fire, jet stream. He stomped his heels. 2 concentrated jets of green fire erupted from the vents in his shoes. He didn't fly. That would take too much stabilization energy for a short dash. Instead, he skated. He hovered 2 inches off the ground, the fire acting as a frictionless thruster. He leaned forward at a 45-degree angle, aerodynamically cutting the wind. Green and orange blurred down the track. The heat wash hit the onlookers. 4.05 seconds, the robot chirked as Izuku crossed the line. 4.13 seconds, it chirked for Bakugo. Bakugo skidded to a halt, smoke rising from his hands. He stared at the scoreboard. He beat me? Bakugo's eyes twitched. By 0.08 seconds, Izuku cooled his jets, landing on his soles. He exhaled a small puff of steam. Efficiency, Kaken. Explosions are multidirectional. Jets are linear. Bakugo looked like he was about to explode, but Aizawa called the next group. Test 2, grip strength. Izuku held the device. He couldn't use fire to enhance his grip directly without melting the machine. Think. Physics. He didn't use fire. He used heat. He channeled a low-level thermal wave into his forearm muscles, increasing blood flow and elasticity, pushing his muscles to their absolute limit without tearing. It was a technique he learned reading about warm-up physiology. 68 kilograms. Whoa! 540 kilograms? Izuku looked over. A tall boy with multiple arms, Shoji, had crushed the machine. Well, can't win them all, Izuku thought, rubbing his arm. Mutant types have the advantage in raw stat checks. Test 3, standing long jump. Bakugo blasted over the sandbox, clearing 60 meters easily. Aoyama, the naval laser boy, shot himself backward, clearing it with style. Izuku stepped up. He took a deep breath. Ignition. He squatted and jumped. As he left the ground, he released a pulse of fire from his soles and his palms, facing backward. He didn't just jump, he soared. He arched high into the air, flipping once for stability, and landed gracefully past the sandbox entirely. Cleared the pit, the robot announced. Aizawa scribbled something on his clipboard. Good mobility. Excellent control in the air. Test 4, repeated side steps. This was Izuku's weakness. Rapid lateral movement required burst propulsion, which generated a lot of heat quickly. Mineta, the small boy, was a blur, bouncing back and forth using his sticky balls. Izuku gritted his teeth. Short bursts. Left. Right. Left. Right. He used tiny explosions of fire from the sides of his shoes to jerk his body sideways. It was jarring and physically demanding. He finished with a respectable score, but he was sweating heavily. His face was flushed. You okay, man? Kirishima, the redhead with the hardening quirk, asked. You look like you're steaming. I am, Izuku panted, waving a hand. Quirk drawback. Overheating. Aizawa watched him. He's reaching his thermal limit. Let's see how he handles the main event. Test 5, the ball throw. This was the decider. Uraraka had just scored infinity, plunging the class into shock. Infinity? That's cheating. Now, it was Izuku's turn. He walked into the circle. The ball felt cool in his hand. Midoriya, Aizawa said from the sidelines. You're doing well. But you're running hot. Izuku wiped sweat from his brow. I can manage, sensei. We'll see. Izuku stood in the center. He looked at the field. Bakugo had hit 700 meters. To stay competitive, to prove he belonged at the top, he needed to match that. He held the ball in his right hand. I can't just throw it. I need to launch it. He took a stance, winding up like a baseball pitcher. Focus the heat. Don't let it leak. Compress it. Green flames began to lick up his arm. The air shimmered. The asphalt beneath his feet began to soften. I'll create a focused explosion directly behind the ball at the moment of release. A cannon shot. Smash! Izuku yelled, internally channeling all might. He whipped his arm forward. The fire roared. PFCT. The fire vanished. Izuku stumbled forward, the momentum of his throw wasted. The ball rolled a pathetic 46 meters. Huh! Izuku stared at his hand. The fire was gone. The heat was gone. He turned around. Aizawa stood there. His capture scarf was floating, defying gravity. His hair was standing on end. And his eyes were glowing a piercing, eerie red. I erased your quirk, Aizawa stated flatly. Erased? Izuku blinked. Then, the realization hit him. The goggles. The worn-out look. You're the erasure hero. Eraserhead. Eraserhead? The class muttered. Never heard of him. He's an underground hero, Izuku whispered. He hates media attention. Aizawa walked closer, invading Izuku's personal space. The man smelled of dry eye drops and coffee. That entrance exam, Aizawa began, his voice low and dangerous. It wasn't rational enough. Even a kid with a dangerous quirk can get points if he just blasts everything in sight. Aizawa narrowed his eyes. I saw your records. Collateral damage reports. The heat warping the infrastructure. The risk of oxygen depletion in closed spaces. I controlled it, Izuku defended, though he felt small under the hero's gaze. Did you? Aizawa countered. Just now, you were preparing a blast that would have sent a shockwave backward. If anyone had been standing behind you, they would have been singed. You focus so much on the target, you forget the environment. Aizawa's eyes bore into him. You have a powerful quirk, Midoriya. Maybe the most destructive in the class. But power without absolute restraint is just a liability. Are you trying to be a hero, or a natural disaster? Izuku flinched. Liability. That word again. Aizawa blinked. His hair fell back down. I returned your quirk. He turned around and walked back to the line. You have 2 throws left. Hurry up and get it over with. Izuku stood there, holding the ball. His heart was pounding. He's right. If I use the cannon shot, the back blast is dangerous. I was so focused on beating Kaken's score, I stopped thinking about safety. He looked at the ball. He looked at the field. I need power, but contained power. No back blast. No wasted heat. He remembered his training in the freezer. Concentration. Needlepoint focus. He didn't wind up this time. He held the ball with 2 fingers, his thumb and index finger, pinching it. He assumed a stance that looked more like he was aiming a dart than throwing a baseball. What is he doing? Bakugo muttered. Izuku took a deep breath. Channel the heat into the fingertips. Not an explosion. A ray gun. He visualized the flame not as a bomb, but as a solid rod of energy extending from his fingers. Pyrokinesis, fingertip rail. He snapped his wrist. At the exact moment the ball left his skin, he released a microscopic, hypercompressed beam of plasma. It hit the back of the ball with 0 splash damage. All the kinetic energy went forward. Crack. The sound was like a whip breaking the sound barrier. A thin green line traced the sky, piercing the clouds. There was no smoke, no massive fireball, just a clean, terrifyingly fast projectile. The class watched in silence as the ball disappeared. Aizawa looked at his device. He grinned, a truly creepy expression. He turned the screen to the class. 755.2 meters. Izuku lowered his hand. His fingers were smoking, bright red from the friction, but the rest of his body was cool. He turned to Aizawa. He didn't smile. He looked serious. 0 collateral damage, sensei. Aizawa looked at the boy. For a second, the teacher's expression softened. Rational. Hey! A roar shattered the moment. Bakugo was charging. Explosions were popping in his palms. His face was twisted in a mask of pure fury. DKU! You bastard! Tell me how you did that. He was fast. He was lethal. He was aiming right for Izuku. Izuku didn't flinch. He planted his feet, ready to ignite a defensive wall. Flip. Suddenly, Bakugo jerked to a halt, gagging. Ribbons of carbon fiber cloth were wrapped tightly around his body, binding his arms to his torso. GHH. What the? My scarf is a capture weapon made of carbon fiber and a special metal alloy, Aizawa muttered, holding the other end of the tape. His eyes were red again. Stop using your quirks. You're giving me dry eye. He released Bakugo, the cloth retracting like a snake. We're wasting time, Aizawa said, turning away. Whoever is next, step up. Bakugo stood there, panting, rubbing his arms. He glared at Izuku. The look wasn't just anger anymore. It was fear. Fear that the pebble was becoming a boulder that would crush him. Izuku met his gaze, then walked back to the group. That was amazing, Uraraka whispered. Over 750 meters. You beat Bakugo. Barely, Izuku whispered back, massaging his throbbing fingers. But I think I annoyed the teacher. The results. The sun was setting by the time the test concluded. The class was exhausted. Izuku was drenching in sweat, his cooling packs long since warm. All right, Aizawa said, gathering them by the scoreboard. I'll skip the verbal feedback. It's a hassle. Here are the rankings. He tapped a button. A hologram projected the list. 1. Momo Yaoyorozu, created tools for every test. Pure efficiency. 2. Shoto Todoroki, ice powers. Insane physical stats. 3. Izuku Midoriya, high scores in dash, jump, and throw. 4. Katsuki Bakugo. 5. Tenya Ida. 20. Minoru Mineta. Izuku scanned the list. 3rd place. He breathed a sigh of relief. And by the way, Aizawa said, turning off the hologram. I was lying about the expulsion. The class froze. It was a logical ruse to draw out the upper limits of your quirks. Silence. Hoa? The class screamed. Of course it was a lie, the tall girl with the ponytail, Yaoyorozu, said confidently. It was obvious if you thought about it. That was a little nerve-wracking, though. Ciro, tape elbows, sighed. Izuku looked at Aizawa. The teacher was walking away, scratching his neck. Was it a lie? Izuku wondered. The pressure he put on us, the way he looked at Midoriya and Bakugo. I don't think he was joking. If we had shown no potential, he would have cut us. Midoriya. Izuku looked up. Aizawa had stopped. Get those fingers iced at the nurse's office. Tomorrow, the real hell begins. Don't melt my classroom. Izuku stood straighter. Yes, sir. Evening. The walk to the train station was quiet at first. Then, Uraraka broke the silence. I'm so tired. She groaned. But that was intense. Midoriya, you were so cool during the ball throw. Pow, you were excellent as well, Uraraka-san, Ida said, chopping the air. Infinity is a formidable ability. Hey Midoriya, Uraraka asked. Why does Bakugo call you Deku? Izuku flinched. Well, in junior high, it was an insult. It's a reading of my name that means useless or wooden doll. That's terrible. Uraraka frowned. But, hearing the way you stood up to him today, and the way you acted in the exam, she punched the air. It sounds like Dikairu to me. Like you can do it, Izuku blinked. Dikairu. I like it. She smiled. It's a hero name. Izuku felt his face heat up, and not from his quirk this time. Deku is fine. He stammered. Midoriya, you are accepting it very easily. Ida noted. It's a Copernican revolution, Izuku muttered, hiding his face. As they laughed and walked toward the station, a shadow watched them from the corner of the school gate. All Might peeked out, grinning. Young Midoriya, he whispered. You survived the first day. But Aizawa-kun is right. The heat is only going to rise. The number 1 hero looked at the file in his hand, the class roster. Rivals. Mentors. Villains. Izuku Midoriya had stepped onto the stage. Now, he just had to keep the fire burning without consuming himself.